Welcome to Conversations on the Coast, San Francisco's premier author interview program. And today is a very, very special day for us here because we're going to be talking about a major medical problem. It's diabetes. It's an epidemic. 12 million Americans have it. It's an epidemic around the world. And we're going to be talking with someone who's just not going to talk about it, but has something to say about reversing it. His name is Dr. Neal Barnard, and Andrew Weil calls him one of the most responsible and authoritative voices in American medicine today. The title of his book, Dr. Neal Barnard's Program for Reversing Diabetes. It's published by Rodale Press, and I appreciate you joining us.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be on your program.
There are many questions that I'm hopefully going to come up with, and you'll be answering during the course of the program. But I want to let our listeners know right away that they can get at you in person this Wednesday, January the 24th at 7 o'clock, because you'll be appearing then at the Borders store on Union Square, 400 Post Street. Is that right?
Yes, that's right, and I'm very much looking forward to that. 7 o'clock at the Borders.
7 o'clock at the Borders, and you're going to answer questions too, right?
Yeah, you bet. We'll show people what the basics are, how this new approach to eating for health works, and then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A, and we'll have copies of this new book there as well.
One of the things that struck me in reading the book is what a terrible disease this is. You write, until now, most have found this condition to be at best an exercise in drudgery, with daily blood tests and medications that promise only to slow the inevitable damage. A patient's life becomes a waiting game, with one complication after another, from nerve symptoms to visual changes and heart and kidney problems. That really is a hopeless outlook.
Well, it can be that way, and I'm sorry to say it is that way for many people, but it doesn't have to be that way. When I was a kid, I grew up in Fargo, North Dakota. My father was the specialist for that area dealing with diabetes. And he would get calls every morning trying to regulate people's blood sugars.
Mm-hmm.
And but the fact of the matter is that in most cases back then and still today, it's a losing game, where 3/4 of people today who have diabetes end up dying of a heart attack. Prematurely, it can subtract up to 10 years off life. And for many people, before all that happens, it leads to disruptions of one's ability to see. It affects kidney function. It affects the nerves. That's all the bad news. The good news is none of that has to happen, and it should not happen. And we have the tools now to stop it from happening. And in fact, for people who got sick of the diabetes diet that they were handed, and it didn't seem to work very well, we now have evidence of something that works dramatically better, that makes all these problems get better. And for people who don't have diabetes, but they want to be healthier, they want to lose weight or get their cholesterol down, these same kinds of diet tools work for them too.
Mm. Yeah, it's really incredible what you're claiming here in a way that many people with this disease can think beyond delaying this kind of inevitable decline, improve their health dramatically, cut blood sugar, increase insulin sensitivity, and that's an extremely important point, and reduce or eliminate medications, and they do this with a simple set of diet changes. I want you to talk a little bit about that phrase, increased insulin sensitivity.
If we think about diabetes globally, what it really is, it's a disease where the body isn't handling sugar properly. Normally sugar, glucose, gets into the muscle cells and other cells of the body to act as their fuel. It's their energy. It's the log on the fire. But in diabetes, the hormone insulin that's supposed to escort glucose into the cell is not doing its job. And in the childhood onset diabetes, which used to be called childhood onset, it's now called type 1 diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that the insulin isn't made anymore. The cells that make it have been destroyed. In type 2 diabetes, which used to be called adult onset, the insulin is there, but it's not able to open the doors on the cell. It's a little bit like if I have a key fits in the lock, but somebody has put gum in the lock, and I'm trying to turn it, and it just won't go. So type 2 diabetes is like that. You've got the key. The key is insulin, but it will not open the door very well, so glucose builds up in the cell. But the breakthrough is this. Past diets said, well, you can't handle sugar, so let's take sugar out of the diet.
Right.
And let's take white bread out of the diet. Let's take out of the diet anything that turns to sugar, and we're catering to the diabetes. The approach that I am suggesting aims to do something different. It aims to target the fundamental problem. It aims to clean the gum out of the lock, if you will. And so the diet that we use, we believe, has the effect of allowing the cell to divest itself of this accumulating fat, these little fat particles that are inside the cell that are interfering with insulin's ability to work. I'm not suggesting we can do it 100%, but what I am suggesting, and what studies other than ours have supported, is that if people make simple but fairly far-reaching diet changes.
All right, hold on that one for a minute. We'll get back to that key and that Jan block some more when we come back, because we're going to have much more to say about this new way to reverse diabetes. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at JimFosterCoc and email JimFosterCoc@gmail.com.
Dr. Neal Barnard's program for reversing diabetes with a subtitle that goes on, The Scientifically Proven System for Reversing Diabetes Without Drugs. That's our book today. Our guest is the author, Dr. Neal Barnard. And a gentleman, Dr. Hans Deal, has this to say about the book. Dr. Barnard's solid scientific work represents a major turning point in the treatment and the outcome of diabetes. Revolutionary in its implications and spectacular in its clarity, this book, with its simple, safe, dietary approach, will bring hope to millions. And those millions are many of them are people who have been, fighting this disease for a long time and following a very different regimen than the one that you suggest. What have they been doing to try and handle their diabetes?
Currently, if you are diagnosed with diabetes and you see a registered dietitian, they'll give you a diet that is based on some sensible guidelines, but on the other hand, in practice, it becomes a bit on the difficult side. First of all, most people who have type 2 diabetes have some weight they'd like to lose. So the first step is you cut calories.
Right.
You might cut 500 calories a day or 1,000 a day off of what you would normally need. So let's say you're normally consuming about 2,000 calories a day. I've got to cut out about a quarter of everything that you want to eat, and that leads people around 7 or 8 at night to feel they're hungry, and they wonder how long they can keep this going. Then they are also counting up carbohydrate. So the bread that you eat or the pasta or the other starchy foods, you're adding it up and trying to keep it about the same from day to day. Why? Simply because if you have your diet about the same every day, your medications can have about the same dose from day to day because they're there to help you store that sugar. In other words, the point of the diet isn't necessarily to cure the diabetes. What it is there to sort of resonate with the drugs that you're on so that your drug dose doesn't have to change a whole lot.
What you're describing, is that what you call in a different place the ADA gold standard diet?
Yes, and as I said, it's sensible. It's understandable that people would choose that diet, but I have to say in practice it becomes rather tedious, and some people even call it sort of a palliation of diabetes, and they have longed for a better way.
And the big problem with this is that you have to combine it with drugs. And once you start going down the drug route, it seems to me the dosages always wind up being increased, don't they?
Well, for most people, that's exactly the career they're on. And don't get me wrong, if whatever diet you're doing, isn't doing it for you, it's a big mistake to not take medication that can help you get it under control.
Sure.
And that's true for diabetes, it's true for cholesterol problems, it's true for blood pressure. It's a mistake for a person to just throw their drugs away. However, if your experience is, diet failed me, and so I have to take one drug, and then as years went by I had to take 2 or 3, plus something for my cholesterol, plus something for my blood pressure, you start adding it up, and people come into our research studies with sacks of drugs. An average person, a typical person, has drugs costing anywhere from $2,000 to or more than $5,000 a year. I'm talking one person.
My God.
One single person. Now, they may not be paying that. Their insurance company may be paying that. But what that means is we're all paying that. And if you multiply that by 20 million people, in more than 20 million people that have diabetes, and this is increasing year by year, it's obvious why we have this huge debate about how can we cover our healthcare costs. My goal is to reverse that trend. My goal is to bring people down on their medicines, to bring them down on their weight, to get their blood sugar back down, to regain their health. Can the disease be eliminated? For some people, perhaps. For others, they'll do better. But the goal is to make time go backward a little bit to when you were healthier.
The startling thing about the book, I think, is that after we look at those facts that you've just been discussing, is that your response to it, if that's the word, is so simple. It's change your diet. Follow a certain diet, a low-fat vegan diet, and it will turn this thing around. Turn around something that all the drugs and all the, super, measured diets don't seem to affect.
We looked around the world, and if you look at countries that follow diets very different from those in the United States. In some cases, they have very, very low prevalence of diabetes. In rural Japan, rural China, there's not much diabetes. However, as the diet westernizes and their rice-based diet is eliminated and a meat-based diet comes in, diabetes has exploded all over Japan. So what we found was a high-carbohydrate diet based on rice and noodles and whatever doesn't cause diabetes. It's not an unhealthful thing, even though those are the very foods that people are fearful of in this country if they have diabetes. So other researchers had tried various kinds of diets. Starting in the mid-1990s, we tried a diet that was vegan, meaning there's no animal fat in it whatsoever.
Listen, I want to come back to the details of that diet. Before we go away, we've got to remind people again that Dr. Barnard will be appearing on Wednesday at 7 o'clock at the Borders store on Union Square, 400 Post Street. Stay tuned for more information on this incredible diet. We'll be back shortly.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at JimFosterCoc and email JimFosterCoc@gmail.com.
Dr. Neal Barnard is the guest. The book is called Dr. Neal Barnard's Program for Reversing Diabetes, the Scientifically Proven System for Reversing Diabetes Without Drugs. It is a book. It is published by Rodale. And Dr. Caldwell B. Esselstyn, Jr., has this to say about it. The long overdue epic scientific breakthrough in diabetes is here. That's what I was saying before. It's a breakthrough, and yet it's so simple. This breakthrough is here in Dr. Neal Barnard's Program for Reversing Diabetes, an obvious must-read for health professionals and for diabetic and potential diabetic patients. And it is interesting to me that the book is constructed that way, that it has sections that will be of particular interest for the health professionals. But in general, it's a book that I find very, very accessible to the person who is diabetic or pre-diabetic. Tell us a little bit more about this diet.
Well, let me lay out maybe a typical day just really quickly.
Oh, that'd be great.
You get up in the morning, and you might have a big bowl of oatmeal with cinnamon and raisins, and we don't worry about the quantity of it. Then for lunch, you might have, say, a veggie chili or something like that, or if you're out at a taco restaurant, skip the meat taco but have the bean burrito, hold the cheese, and once again, I'm not worried about your quantity. If you want to have a snack in the afternoon, maybe some fruit or something. Let's say you're at an Italian restaurant for dinner. You top your pasta. Yeah, you can have pasta on this diet, which will surprise people with diabetes. But you're not going to top it with a cream sauce or a meat sauce. It'll be, say, a light marinara sauce. So what's left out? We are leaving out Animal-derived products, so the meats and the dairy products, are gone. That eliminates animal fat. Keep the vegetable oils low, too. So if you haven't learned how to cook without using lots of oils, I'm going to show you how to do that. And then we're going to set aside sugar, white bread, that sort of thing, but we are not going to go low-carb. I'm going to show you which carbohydrate-rich foods are better. Instead of white bread, we're going to use rye and pumpernickel, for example. Very simple.
It's amazing. It really is amazing. I mean, the more I looked at the book, the less hungry I got. I figured, hey, this is good. You can really eat with this thing.
You can. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not expecting that people will binge, but I am expecting that you'll be guided by your hunger and your sense of satiety, but we're making a major qualitative shift. Once the animal fat is gone, cholesterol levels fall. With all that high fiber intake, you get full slightly earlier than before. That triggers the satiety response so that people start to slim down, average about a pound a week. After a year, you've lost about 50 pounds. The diabetes is improving in the process. We found that this diet is equivalent in power to about one oral diabetes medication, or perhaps slightly stronger than that. It's equivalent, similar to certain statin drugs for lowering cholesterol. And you put it together. It's if this were a drug, people would have been scrambling to patent it.
You have taken the campaign, in a sense, beyond the book. You've taken it directly to Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. You have written a letter to him from your group, the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, and you asked him to address the growing diabetes crisis, predicting that more than 175,000 children born in California each year will develop diabetes during their lifetimes. What else did you tell him?
Yes, that's right. We've seen a tremendous explosion of diabetes. If you go back to 1994, it was about 4.7% of the adult population had this disease. But if you fast forward 10 years to 2004, it wasn't 4.7% anymore. It was up to 7.1%. And it's rising and rising year by year by year, and it's hitting people earlier and earlier in life. What we used to call adult-onset diabetes, type 2, you can now see in kids of 16 and 17. And
oh, my gosh.
Oh, it's happening. And in certain groups, it's more than 1 in 3. And this is not going to change. And the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention predicted that out of every 3 kids born today, 1 will grow up to develop diabetes, and that it's going to shorten their life and make them miserable in some ways. We have to tackle this, but we can tackle it with food. So I had just 2 suggestions for the governor.
Okay.
Number 1, we need a new emphasis on prevention. That means you don't wait until someone's got it. You can prevent it, and we can prevent it if we promote big lifestyle changes. Step 2 is we need a new emphasis on nutrition. If we really work with the businesses, work with the schools, work with families so that they know what a vegan diet is, so that you shouldn't have to have a kid going through the lunch line with no vegetarian option whatsoever. If their only choice is chicken nuggets and Salisbury steak with gravy, we are going to have kids who are overweight and have a high risk for heart disease and diabetes. I want to reverse that so that everything that is in that lunch line is something you're proud for your kids to select.
And this diet change, you say further on in the letter, will reduce the cost of medicine by anywhere from $130 annually to $3,000
per person.
Per person.
Yeah, per person. And right now, more than 2 million people in California have this disease.
This is a really great and important story that we're telling here, and you can hear more about it 2 ways. 1, buy the book. It's a very good book. 2, be at the Borders store on Union Square on Wednesday this week at 7 o'clock, and you'll hear the good doctor in person. This has been Conversations on the Coast, and I'm Jim Foster.
Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at Jim Foster COC and email jimfostercoc@gmail.com.